The topic of this segment is the placenta. The placenta is a fusion of maternal and fetal tissues. So it starts developing from the developing embryo, and then as it interacts with the maternal uterus, there are changes in the maternal uterine tissue to accommodate the relationship between the maternal and the fetal tissues. The placenta has many very important functions. First of all, it plays a role in the transfer of nutrients from the mother to the fetus. Obviously, the fetus, being inside the mother's body, doesn't have direct access to food, so it gets its nutrients from the mother's bloodstream. It's also the gas exchange organ for the fetus because the fetus doesn't have direct access to air, can't breathe. The oxygen that it gets for cellular metabolism comes from the mother's circulation, and the byproducts of cellular metabolism, the carbon dioxide, is also released from the fetus's body into the maternal circulation. And the third major function of the placenta is the production of hormones. And these hormones both maintain the integrity of the tissues that make up the placenta. They also maintain pregnancy, so prevent the mother's body from interrupting pregnancy before the fetus is done developing and ready to be born. So this is kind of a tricky business because you know that the reproductive cycle is cyclical in female mammals. In most female mammals, they may ovulate several times in succession, and if that egg is not fertilized, they're going to ovulate again. But if the egg is fertilized, they don't ovulate again, and then they have that period of pregnancy where the embryo and then the fetus is developing. Species differ in the kinds of hormones that are produced by the placenta and also in the importance of those hormones in maintaining pregnancy. So in some species of mammals, the ovaries play a major role in maintaining pregnancy, and the placenta is less involved in making those hormones that keep pregnancy going. While in other species, the ovaries are only important in the very early stages, and once the placenta is fully formed, it takes over making those hormones that keep pregnancy going. If we look closely at the structure of the placenta, it consists of a series of membranes that surround or are in proximity to the developing embryo. And from the outside to the inside, these are the chorion, the allantois, and the amnion. And to understand the relationship between these membranes and what they do, it's useful to look at the membranes that surround the developing embryo inside the egg, because the earliest mammals laid eggs, and the development of the placenta was something that came later, and the structure of the placenta wasn't completely new and novel. It really is based off of the structure of membranes within the egg. So if you look at an egg, this is actually a chicken egg, but for a reptile egg or a monotreme egg, it would look very, very similar. So here's the developing embryo right here, and all the different membranes are color-coded around the embryo. So here's the eggshell on the very outside, and there is a membrane that surrounds the whole structure here. But on the outside of the developing embryo is something called the chorion. And then there are several other membranes farther in. So this one right here is called the allantois, and that serves as a storage site for waste products that come out of the embryo, and also plays a big role in mammals in gas exchange. Then you have the yolk sac here, which is an offshoot of the embryo, and in eggs that are laid by reptiles and birds and monotremes, the yolk sac contains all the nutrition and raw materials that are necessary for the developing embryo. The yolk sac is still present in placental mammals is just much smaller, and so it only plays a role in nutrition in the very early stages of development. I think in humans, it lasts for about 6 weeks into pregnancy, and then all the nutrients that are in that yolk sac have been absorbed by the developing embryo. And then finally, right around the embryo itself, you have the amnion. So that's the membrane that first envelops the developing embryo. So all these same structures are present in placental mammals. They just don't have the outermost membrane and the shell. If we look at the diversity of placental types in different mammals, we find that there are two major categories of placentas in mammals that give birth to live young. We have choriovitelline placentas, which are the type that marsupials have, and then we have chorioallantoic placentas, which are the types that that placental mammals, all placental mammals have. If we take a closer look at these types of placentas, you'll notice that they still have all three of the types of membranes, the amnion, the allantois, and the chorion, but the arrangement of those membranes differs. And in particular, what differs is the amount of fusion that occurs between the different membranes and the amount of vascularization, so the amount of blood vessel development in different parts of the placenta. So remember, the marsupials are the ones with the choriovitelline placenta, and these are just cartoon renderings, so I encourage you to check out some more accurate diagrams that are in your textbook. But this gives you the general idea of the arrangement of the different membranes. So the black thing here that looks like a bean is the developing embryo, and it's surrounded by the amnion, which is color-coded in blue. The allantois is a membrane that is associated with the embryo, and then the yolk sac also, and the yolk sac is fused to the chorion so that those two particular membranes are found in close proximity. Part of the chorion then is kind of wrinkled so that the surface area is increased, and it's more vascularized than other regions. So there's a lot of extra blood flow from the embryo to this vascularized region. And this is where the embryo will kind of attach itself to the maternal uterus, but it doesn't attach itself too deeply. It just kind of works its way into a little pocket, a little indentation in the maternal uterus. And that's where it's going to sit for the days to weeks until it's developed enough to be born. And there's not a huge amount of gas exchange and nutrient exchange across the placenta because the maternal circulation is still kind of far away. The tissues of the uterus and the fetal placental membranes are not interknit that closely. So there's some gas exchange, a little bit of nutrient exchange, but not a whole lot. So it's not a really efficient placenta. What happens mostly is that some of the cells from the outside of the uterus, the epithelial level layer of cells of the female's uterus will kind of die and slough off, and those will kind of work their way in. They'll be absorbed in through the membranes of the placenta, and that will provide some of the nutrients that are needed by the developing embryo. If we look, on the other hand, at the chorioallantoic placenta, remember that it has the same kinds of membranes as the choriovitelline placenta, but they are developed in a slightly different way. So we have the developing embryo, the amnion in blue, right around it. We have the allantois here in green. We have a little yolk sac, but this time it's not fused to the chorion. The chorion is the outermost membrane, and this time in the chorioallantoic placenta, it's the allantois and the chorion that are fused together And in this region where the membranes are fused together, there's a lot of vasculature, so there's a lot of extra development of blood vessels. And in addition, you have these structures called villi, which are like little finger-like projections of the chorion, and they actually invade the maternal uterine tissue. So this kind of placenta is much more deeply interwoven into the tissues of the female's body, because of these villi that actually work their way into the tissue and really anchor that developing embryo in very, very tightly. This is a much more efficient placenta. There's a lot more gas exchange going on. There's a lot more nutrient exchange. And so that enables pregnancy to go a lot longer, for embryos to get a lot bigger, grow faster. So this is the arrangement that we see in all of the placental mammals. It turns out that there's one marsupial that also has a chorioallantoic placenta, and that's the bandicoot. And the bandicoot placenta is called chorioallantoic because it does have this fusion between the chorion and the allantois. But it differs from the chorioallantoic placenta of placental mammals in that it doesn't have villi. It looks more like the wrinkled outer surface of the choriovitelline placenta. So it's sort of a more developed version of the placenta, a little bit different than what we see in most other marsupials, but still not quite as well developed and ready to transport nutrients and gases across those membrane layers as what we see in placental mammals. So it's sort of an intermediate kind of structure.